I want to start today with a specific memory,
Yep.
or if you haven't experienced it, maybe a specific kind of hunger.
Okay.
Picture a bustling street. It's late afternoon, the sun's dipping low, shadows are long, and there's this line of people wrapping around the block.
I think I know where you're going with this.
And they're not waiting for, concert tickets or a new phone. They're waiting for a bakery.
It's a very specific kind of energy in that line. It's all anticipation.
Right. And then the door is open, and this wave of heat just hits you. It smells like toasted sesame, yeast, and scorching hot flour, that rush of fresh bread.
Mm-hmm.
But we aren't talking about a baguette or, a sourdough loaf today. We're talking about the Ramadan Pide, the Ramadan Pide.
Which is, it's arguably the king of the dinner table in Turkish culture, especially during the holy month.
Definitely.
But I think we need to make a distinction right off the bat. Most people, when they hear pita, they think of those pocket breads you buy in a plastic bag at the store.
Oh, yeah, the dry ones.
Exactly. There may be a week old. That is not what we are talking about.
Not even close. I made that mistake once. I bought one of those long shelf-life pitas thinking it would be the same. It was like eating cardboard.
Yeah.
Today, we're looking at something completely different. We had a guide here for Osmanlı. That's Ottoman-Style Ramadan Pide.
And that phrase, Osmanlı, it does a lot of heavy lifting.
How so?
It implies a few things. First, history. We're talking about a recipe with roots in the imperial kitchens of the Ottoman Empire, but it also implies a certain richness, a level of care.
So not just a staple food.
Exactly. This isn't just flour and water thrown together to fill a stomach. It was designed to be a centerpiece.
And that's our mission today. We're going to deconstruct this recipe. We want to understand how a bread that was originally made for massive wood-fired stone ovens,
Imperial ovens.
right, can actually be recreated in a standard home kitchen. And looking at the breakdown, it seems like it needs a bit of chemistry knowledge.
It absolutely does. All baking is chemistry, but this style really relies on managing protein structures and heat transfer in a very clever way. The source material we have here basically outlines a method for tricking your modern ingredients into behaving like they're in a 17th century bakery.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation, the building blocks. On the surface, it looks pretty standard, flour and water. But the ratios caught my eye. It calls for 1 kilogram of flour, specifically white sifted flour, and 550 milliliters of warm water.
Let's pause on that ratio for a second. That's roughly 55% hydration, which in the world of bread is actually quite manageable.
What does that mean exactly?
It's not a super wet, sloppy dough like you'd find with the ciabatta, but it's not dry like a bagel dough either. It's right in that sweet spot where it's soft, but it still holds a shape.
And it has to hold a shape because of that design we'll get to. But before that, we have to talk about the engine, the yeast.
The life of the party.
The recipe gives you a choice. 15 grams of dry yeast or 20 grams of fresh. I always feel like fresh yeast sounds more, artisanal. Does it really matter?
In the final product, not really, as long as you treat them right. The critical step here isn't the type of yeast, it's the waking up phase. The guide is very specific about this.
Right, you don't just toss it into the flour.
No. You have to create a starter solution. You mix that yeast with warm water, and this is the catalyst, sugar.
2 teaspoons of sugar.
Right. And I think people sometimes hesitate to put sugar in savory bread. They think it'll make it sweet.
I was wondering about that.
But the yeast eats the sugar. It metabolizes it to produce carbon dioxide. That's the breath of the bread. You let that mixture sit for 10 or 15 minutes until it's foaming and bubbly. If you skip this, or if your water is too hot and kills the yeast,
The whole project is dead.
the whole project fails before it even starts.
Okay, so we have our bubbly yeast water. This is where the Ottoman part really kicks in. If I'm making a standard loaf, I might just stop there. Flour, water, yeast, salt. Done. But this recipe starts raiding the fridge.
It's moving into the territory of what we call an enriched dough.
Enriched.
The first addition is milk. About half a tea glass, which is a classic Turkish measurement, but let's call it roughly 50 to 60 milliliters.
And why milk? Is it just for flavor?
It does add a subtle sweetness from the lactose, but scientifically it's about texture. The milk fat and milk solids, they tenderize the crumb. Water evaporates in the oven, but the fat stays.
So it stays softer for longer.
Exactly. It gives you that velvety interior that pulls apart in strands.
Okay, that makes sense. Softness is key.
Oh.
But then we also have added fat. The recipe offers a choice between 2 tablespoons of olive oil or butter.
Again, this is about tenderizing. It's about shortening the gluten strands. Gluten is like a rubber band network. If it's too strong, the bread is tough and chewy. When you coat those proteins in fat, oil, or butter, doesn't matter. They can't bond as tightly, so the bread becomes tender. It bites clean.
Now, here is the ingredients that stop me. I honestly thought it was a typo at first. Vinegar.
Uh-huh.
1 tablespoon of vinegar in bread. I mean, are we making sourdough
Yeah.
or pickles?
It does sound odd, doesn't it? But this is actually a brilliant piece of kitchen engineering. You aren't adding enough to taste it. You won't bite into the bread and think salad dressing.
So what on earth is it doing in there?
It's a dough conditioner. Think about the final shape of a Ramadan Pide. It's flat, it's wide, and it has to hold a very specific shape. The acid in the vinegar, it weakens the gluten network just enough to make the dough more extensible.
Extensible.
It means stretchy. There's a difference between elasticity, where dough snaps back like a rubber band, and extensibility, where it stretches out and stays there.
Ah, okay. Like pizza dough that keeps shrinking back.
Exactly. That has too much elasticity. The vinegar relaxes the dough so you can shape it into that wide, flat circle without fighting it.
That is fascinating. So the vinegar is basically a relaxation therapist for the gluten.
That's a great way to put it. It makes the dough cooperative.
And then the final curveball in the mix, an egg. Not on top, we'll get to the glaze, but inside the dough.
A whole egg. This is for structure and richness. The protein in the egg white helps the bread rise and hold its shape, while the yolk adds that richness and color to the crumb. It's bridging the gap between a daily bread and a special occasion bread.
It's also more sustaining, I guess.
For sure. You have to remember, during Ramadan, you're fasting all day. When you finally eat, you want something that provides real energy. This bread is designed to be sustaining.
So we have this complex slurry of ingredients. We have activated yeast, milk, vinegar, oil, egg. Now we have to combine it all with the flour. And the method described is pretty old school. It calls it the pool technique.
The classic well method.
Yeah.
You see it in pasta making too. You sift your kilo of flour into a big bowl or onto a counter. You mix in your salt, and don't forget the salt, or the bread tastes like nothing. And then you dig a crater in the center.
Like a volcano.
Exactly like a volcano. You pour all those wet ingredients right into the middle, and then you slowly start collapsing the flour walls into the liquid.
Why do it this way? I mean, why not just dump it all in a mixer?
You can use a mixer, of course, but the pool method gives you incredible control. You incorporate the flour gradually, it prevents lumps, and it lets you feel the hydration. As you mix, you can tell if the dough is thirsty or if it's too wet.
And once it's combined, the real work starts. The kneading. The guide says, knead until it stops sticking to your hands, and it estimates about 10 minutes.
10 minutes by hand is a long time. It's a workout. But you cannot shortcut this.
What happens if I get lazy and stop at 5 minutes?
Then you don't get a padesi. You get a dense, heavy brick. Kneading is what organizes the gluten. Imagine the proteins in flour like a tangled ball of yarn. Kneading unravels them and lines them up into these straight sheets. Those sheets are what trap the gas from the yeast. If you don't knead enough, the gas escapes and the bread doesn't rise. When the dough becomes smooth and stops sticking to your skin, that's the gluten telling you, okay, I'm strong enough now.
So you really earn your bread.
You really do.
Okay, so we've done the workout. We have to wait. The dough needs to rise. We cover it with a damp cloth. Let it sit for about an hour. I always find this part agonizing. I want to bake immediately.
Yeah.
But this is where the magic happens, isn't it?
It's a frenzy of activity inside that bowl. The yeast is consuming sugars, multiplying, releasing carbon dioxide. The dough is literally inflating. But more importantly, fermentation is creating flavor.
Right. It's not just about size.
Not at all. The byproducts of that yeast activity are organic acids and alcohol, which give bread its complex aroma. If you rush this, your bread will just taste flat. It needs that hour to develop its character.
So our hour passes. The dough has doubled. It's all puffy. Now we move to shaping. And the recipe uses a measurement unit that I absolutely love. It doesn't say weigh out 200 grams. It says mandolina büyüklüğünde.
Tangerine-sized.
It's so visual. It feels like a grandmother standing next to you going, no, bit bigger, like a tangerine.
It speaks to the intuitive nature of this kind of cuisine. It's not about digital scales. It's about feel. You divide the dough into 8 or 10 of these tangerine-sized balls. Then you roll them smooth and flatten them out.
And how flat are we talking here?
The guide suggests about 1 centimeter thick. You can use a rolling pin or just press them out with your hands. And remember, thanks to our friend the vinegar, the dough should be compliant. It shouldn't spring back too much.
But if we just bake a flat circle, that's just a flatbread. It's not a Ramzan Pide. There is a visual signature that makes this bread iconic. We have to talk about the scoring.
This is the fingerprint of the bread. You use a knife or sometimes a special tool to press a pattern into the dough. Typically, you create a circle around the edge, like a pizza crust border, and then inside that circle, you do a lattice pattern, diamonds or squares.
Is this purely for looks? Is it just to make it pretty for the holiday?
It's aesthetically pleasing, for sure, but in baking, form usually follows function. If you didn't score it, this enriched dough would puff up in the oven like a pita pocket.
Oh, like a balloon.
Exactly. It would separate into two layers. The scoring acts like a structural weld. It pins the top crust to the bottom crust in those lines, forcing the bread to expand horizontally and evenly, rather than just inflating vertically.
That makes so much sense. It's crowd control for the dough bubble.
Precisely. And it increases the surface area for the crust, which means more flavor.
Speaking of crust, we need to achieve that specific color. If you walk past a bakery in Istanbul during Ramadan, the pides are just glowing. They're deep, deep golden brown. And apparently, that's not just from the heat. It's the glaze.
The healing mixture, as some call it. The recipe calls for egg yolk mixed with a teaspoon of water.
Okay, I was going to ask about the water. Why dilute the yolk? Wouldn't pure yolk give a better color?
Pure yolk is actually too potent. It's very thick, so it's hard to brush on evenly. You'd get streaks. But more importantly, pure yolk has a high sugar and protein content that burns very, very quickly.
So it would char?
It would turn black before the inside is cooked.
Yeah.
The water thins it out for an even coating, and it just moderates that browning reaction. It allows the bread to get that beautiful mahogany gold without burning.
And then the final touch. The sprinkles.
The confetti, sesame seeds, and Sorek otu nigella seeds.
I feel like the nigella seeds are non-negotiable.
I agree. Nigella seeds have this very complex flavor. It's slightly oniony, a bit peppery, a little bitter. And when you combine that with the nutty, oily sweetness of the sesame seeds, you create a flavor profile that is instantly recognizable.
It's the smell.
It triggers that Ramadan memory we talked about at the start.
And the text mentions a pinch of salt on top, too.
Yes, just a light sprinkle adds a little savory crunch. Wakes up your palate when you bite into that crust.
Right. The pieds are shaped, they're scored, they're glazed and sprinkled. Now we face the final boss, the oven. The recipe is very demanding here. It says 250 degrees Celsius. That's 480 Fahrenheit. That is hot.
That is nearly maxing out most home ovens.
Why so aggressive? I bake cookies at like 180 Celsius. Why are we blasting this thing?
Because we're trying to simulate a stone oven. An imperial wood-fired oven is a beast of radiant heat. When you slide dough into an oven like that, two things happen immediately. First, oven spring.
Okay.
The intense heat hits the water in the dough, turns it to steam instantly. The gas bubbles expand violently, making the bread super fluffy. Second, you get that Maillard reaction, the browning of the crust, almost instantly.
So now if you try to be gentle and bake this at 180.
You'd ruin it. At a lower temperature, the water would just evaporate slowly. The bread would dry out before it browned. You'd end up with a hard, pale biscuit. You need that thermal shock to cook the dough in 10 to 15 minutes while keeping the moisture locked inside.
Crispy on the outside, steaming on the inside.
Only high heat does that.
So it's a sprint, not a marathon.
Exactly. You have to watch it like a hawk. There is a very, very thin line between perfect golden brown and burnt. At 250 degrees, that window is maybe 30 seconds.
Okay, so the timer goes off. You pull it out. The kitchen smells amazing. The guide has one final, very important rule for us.
Serve it hot. Immediately.
No letting it cool on a wire rack.
No.
Oh.
Not for this. The texture of Ramazan Pide is at its absolute peak when it is still steaming. As it cools, the enriched dough will toughen up slightly. The magic is in that fresh, hot, soft tear.
It's meant to be brought to the table just as the call to prayer is heard for iftar.
It's the guest of honor. The source text describes it as holding the head corner of the table.
And in terms of pairings, the guide is pretty broad. It says soups, meats, olive oil dishes.
Well, think about the mechanics of eating. You tear off a piece of this hot, flexible bread. You use it to scoop up some hummus or dip it into a lentil soup, or wrap it around a piece of grilled meat, it's a utensil as much as it is a food.
That's a good point.
The nigella seeds cut through the richness of meat, and that soft crumb soaks up the juices of the olive oil dishes, the zeytinyağlılar.
It really is a universal partner for the Turkish table.
Even with sweets, the bread itself isn't sugary, so having it with a bit of jam or honey at sahur, the pre-dawn meal, works perfectly too.
We started this deep dive looking at a list of ingredients: flour, vinegar, milk. But what we've really uncovered is a history lesson disguised as a recipe.
It's a story of adaptation. That's what I love about this Osmanlı Yüzyılı guide. It acknowledges that we don't live in the 17th century anymore. We don't have wood-fired ovens in our apartments.
Right.
But it doesn't just surrender. It uses science, the vinegar for elasticity, the milk for softness, the high heat, to bridge that gap.
It's recreating the experience of the imperial oven using the tools of the modern kitchen.
Exactly. It preserves the soul of the tradition, the sharing of hot bread, without being a gatekeeper about the equipment.
I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners. You might think, oh, I can't make traditional bread because I don't have a bakery. But this guide proves that with a little understanding of why ingredients work, why the vinegar is there, why the heat needs to be so high, you can basically hack history.
And honestly, the result is going to be infinitely better than anything you could ever pull out of a plastic bag.
No comparison.
Yeah.
So here's my challenge to you listening. This Ramadan, or really any weekend you want a project, try the vinegar trick. Crank your oven to 250, scare your family a little bit with the heat, and see if you can recreate that imperial texture.
Just don't forget the nigella seeds.
Never forget the seeds. Thanks for diving deep with us into the chemistry and culture of the Ramadan Pide. We'll see you on the next one.